Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Saturday, February 22nd, 2020, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research Channel here on YouTube. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Okay, guys, well, I'm a little sick of this, but anybody who's been following my channel for some time now knows I've mentioned quite frequently that I didn't think that radiocarbon dating was any good. And I first came in contact with this sort of criticism on it through Sylvie's channel because LAH Russia did like a serious study. Now, these are all serious scientists from Russia who had their own criticisms for radiocarbon dating and tree ring dating, and they go over it. And Sylvia had posted those videos, I think, to her channel. Maybe she did. Maybe it was just on the LAH channel. You can watch it in Russian, but and they have some slides, etc. But Sylvie went over it on her channel about the radiocarbon dating. So anyway, there's these criticisms of it, and at the time when I found out about it, I tried looking some stuff up. There was a couple of papers done in the 90s, and of course there's always been some source of criticism within the peer group there of academics, but nothing really that would dispel it in any way. But as is always the case, these things end up being a little bit more present, let's put it that way, than we expect. Because even if these things are found, I mean, who is seeing this data? Who is doing this research and letting everybody know? Nobody. So unless you read an article or a college paper on the subject matter, I mean, how are you going to come in contact with this? So look, I'm a little sick of this whole thing, because especially in the Americas with the carbon dating, because every time I hear these carbon dates, I'm like, what? It's like, this can't possibly be right. It's always followed by the New World, quote unquote, moniker to follow along with it. And I'm just, especially with the nature of the anomalous geological features on the North American continent, with all of these craters and excavations and whatever it is. I mean, the layering of the soil, the sedimentary layering in the Americas is quite different from around the world. It has to be evaluated in a completely different manner, but they don't think so, because they're not admitting to any of that stuff. But I always hear about this carbon, no matter what I read or I watch or whatever it is, and as they say in this study here, that it's the gold mark. I mean, it's the benchmark for this kind of scientific research, this dating research. So in any case, I'm always looking around for these things, and what I'm just sick of hearing about the Americas and this whole New World bias that's incorporated into everything they think about. And you got to think about this way too. If carbon dating is inaccurate, okay, so they're drawing all sorts of hypothesis from this radiocarbon dating as part of their research, etc. So they're bound to be drawing the wrong conclusions. And see, this is the danger of it. So not only are they drawing the wrong conclusions from it, but it circulates around. People think of it as fact when it isn't anything but theories or hypotheses, because nobody was there to see these things and tell us about it firsthand. This is the way it is. Okay, so look, it's just, I'm sick of hearing about it. So I think a lot of people think when they hear carbon 14, it comes right out of their mouth, real easy, like, because they think it's this sort of proven scientific analysis technical analysis equipment that, is fail safe or something like that or whatever. I mean, all I know is that the further back in time you go with carbon dating, the margin of error starts to increase like exponentially. So, you're going back, hundreds of thousands of years or even 50,000 years, whatever it is, the margin of error is in like the hundreds of years, the thousands of years. And, that's all just okay, or whatever, but it's not okay. Many mainstream academics are not happy with radiocarbon dating themselves, and they question its accuracy, and they're always looking for new methods to do dating. And, tree ring dating is a different story altogether. Maybe we'll get into that in another video, but this one is about carbon dating and how it's been inaccurate. It is inaccurate. And this is, whatever you've read or whatever that mentions radiocarbon 14 dating or whatever it is, you might as well just throw that right in the garbage because it's worthless. Worthless, okay? And, immediately you're going to think, wow, this has got to be, some alternative researchers, making this claim or whatever. And, I always do think that. I do often think that, and and coming across these things, I actually ran into a couple of articles about it. Silicon Republic, which I have no idea what they're about. Maybe they're into a silicon-based life form beginnings for this. I've heard people talk about that. Maybe the creatures that live in space that I call the sky critters, and Trevor James Constable called the sky beasts and atmospheric organisms. Maybe they're silicon-based life forms. Who knows? But in any case, I saw this article in the Silicon Republic and I read it, and it's, I was like, okay, let me see if I can find one that's not like, some alternative sort of website or whatever. So I looked at Science Daily, and they put the source right up at the top, which is Cornell University. And University is a place where very highly specialized science is done, and on all sorts of things, especially agriculture and geology and all this kind of things. Connecticut U has their own sort of sect over there that's spreading misinformation, but Cornell seems to be pretty upfront about what they're doing, and they released this. And it's actually an admonishment here. So I want to go to the source, as I often do. I check all these things out. People send me articles, and they're like, "Hey, Bloodcat, check this out. This article about this or that or the other thing, whatever it is." And I often do, I check on it to see if there's any sort of valid source for the article itself. And sometimes there's not. I'm trying to validate the information myself, so I'm just not, reading an article from Silicon Republic, and everybody's like, who the F is Silicon Republic? Who cares, So, but here we have it at the source from Cornell University, so I want to read it to you, okay, because this throws all the research that's been done using radiocarbon 14 dating on its head, okay? It's NG, okay? What these scientists are suggesting at the end of this whole thing is that you better fine-tune this stuff because it's not accurate, you see? So if all the conclusions and hypotheses and theories derived from carbon-14 dating that you see, and all the research and books and all that kind of stuff, you can just throw that right out the window and everything to do with it, okay? And people like say, well, not everything. Well, yeah, maybe not everything, but the major hypotheses and conclusions about these things are going to be way, way off, and we're approaching fantasy land, you understand? So we don't want that. So let's start from scratch. How about that? You know, when you're writing like your term paper and you write a few lines and you're like, ah, I blew that. You crumble it up and you start all over again. Not this stuff you put white out on it and tape and stuff and scribble it out with your pen and then go on writing. No, because that's no good. Got to start fresh, my friend. So let's read this from university specialists, academics in various fields and various laboratories from across the country collaborated on this research into radiocarbon dating. So let's just see what they got to say. All right? And this is 2018. All right? So it's very recent. Okay, so the next time I hear radiocarbon dating says this, and radiocarbon this says that, and this is the oldest settlement. I'm going to say, you know what? That's what you found. This is the early settlement in America. That's what you found with the radiocarbon dating. Yeah, that's what we found. Oh yeah, you want to know what I found with radiocarbon dating? No, what? What did you find? Your ass. Now sit down and shut up, and don't open your mouth again. Okay, ding-a-ling, doofus, here's a dunce cap for you. All right, Mr. College Professor. Now listen up. Keep your pie hole shut. New radiocarbon cycle research may alter history. I like this title better though. Carbon dating accuracy called into question after a major flaw discovery. Yep, major flaw. Not a little one. Major. Scientific research often depends on the degree of certainty in the data while allowing for the likelihood of change, new findings overriding old theories and creating new ones. Change is a given, especially true when taking weather and climate into account. Oh, that's very interesting right there. Archaeologist Stuart Manning and colleagues have revealed variations in the radiocarbon cycle at certain periods of time, affecting frequently cited standards used in archaeological and historical research relevant to the southern Levant region, Israel, southern Jordan, and Egypt. Now, they're referring to these areas especially because there's intensive research going on in these areas and some of the oldest history to be gleaned out of these areas and whatnot. So this is where they're focusing their admonishment. But if it applies here, it applies everywhere else. It's ridiculous, okay? I guess they don't want to attack everybody at the same time. I'm sure they got a lot of feedback about this, but let's read on. Archaeologist Stuart Manning and colleagues have revealed variations. Okay, we read that. So frequently cited standards using archaeological and historical research relevant to the southern Levant region, Israel, southern Jordan, and Egypt. These variations or offsets of up to 20 years in the calibration of precise radiocarbon dating could be related to climatic conditions. Okay. So they're saying these climatic conditions are throwing these things all off. And they have to take that into account. Now, how are they going to correlate that? I have no idea, but maybe they don't have any idea either, but this is what they're saying. This is what they found. Manning, the Goldwin Smith Professor of Classical Archaeology in the Department of Classics and Director of the Cornell Tree Ring Laboratory, is the lead author of Fluctuating Radiocarbon Offsets Observed in the Southern Levant and Implications for Archaeological Chronology Debates, published May 29th in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Pre-modern radiocarbon chronologies rely on a standardized northern and southern hemisphere calibration curves to obtain calendar dates from organic material. The current northern hemisphere standards is INTCAL 13, and published in 2013. These standard calibration curves assume that any given time radiocarbon levels are similar and stable everywhere across each hemisphere. The Cornell-led team had questions and suspicions. We weren't looking to test the assumption behind the whole field of radiocarbon dating, Manning said. We know from atmospheric measurements over the last 50 years that radiocarbon levels vary through the year. And we also know that plants typically grow at different times in different parts of the northern hemisphere. So we wondered whether the radiocarbon levels relevant to dating organic material might also vary for different areas and whether this might affect archaeological dating. Some research has suggested there might be regional differences in radiocarbon levels and hence problems for the standard model, he said. We set out to see if we could observe such differences over time and whether they were relevant to archaeological dating. If the existing assumed dates were to change, then you might discover a more complicated story, which is what we found. An unrecognized but visible complication that affects the radiocarbon standard used up to now for the southern Levant region. This finding changes dates at certain periods in the past, which affects the history we write. Okay, so get that. And it's wrong there. It's wrong in a lot of other places too, my friends. But, baby steps, I guess, because, you can't rain on everybody's parade right away because, there's going to be a lot of angry people. The authors measured a series of carbon-14 ages in southern Jordan tree rings with established calendar dates between 1610 and 1940 AD. They found that contemporary plant material growing in the southern Levant shows an average offset in radiocarbon age of about 19 years compared with INTCAL 13. Manning noted that scholars working on the early Iron Age and biblical chronology in Jordan and Israel are doing sophisticated projects with radiocarbon age analysis, which argue for very precise findings. This then becomes the timeline of history. But our work indicates that it's arguable their fundamental basis is faulty. They are using a calibration curve that is not accurate for this region. The standard INTCAL 13 curve is constructed from measurements of radiocarbon levels in trees from Central and Northern Europe and North America. Comparing his team's results against INTCAL 13, trees growing in southern Jordan are showing a different amount of radiocarbon compared with trees in Central and Northern Europe and in North America, Manning said. INTCAL 13 offers a pretty good guide to mid-latitude areas of the Northern Hemisphere, but not, we discover, for other regions like the southern Levant. This affects the timeline of the past in these areas. Apparent fluctuations in the offset through time may be a consequence of climatic changes, periods of warming and cooling modulating the local growing seasons, the researchers say. These variations seem to relate to changes in regional climate, which likely see growing seasons moving a little earlier or later, Manning said. For example, we see larger offsets in the period 1685 through 1762 AD and 1818 to 1912 AD. You notice the gap there from 1762 and then up to 1818, and as I will recall for you, in 1816, the northern hemisphere of the world experienced what they called the year without a summer. And by the end of the early 1800s, in 1810, I believe, was the coldest decade in 500 years. So it's interesting, that little skip in there. And these seem to link with generally warming conditions in the southern Levant. Applying their results to previously published chronologies, the researchers also show how even the relatively small offsets they observe can shift the calendar dates by enough to alter ongoing archaeology, historical, and paleoclimate debates. Okay, so this is how much impact these mistakes have. Even a minor one has tremendous impact. We have only investigated tree rings from 1610 and 1940 so far, but we can reasonably assume that a similar pattern of radiocarbon fluctuations occurred in the centuries before this region. In the centuries before for this region, said Manning, who has published extensive research on radiocarbon and tree ring chronologies and has written about and taught courses on climate change through history. There has been much debate for several decades among scholars arguing for different chronologies, sometimes only decades to a century apart, each with major historical implications. And yet these studies may all be inaccurate since they are using the wrong radiocarbon information. Okay, folks? Okay? This is like rats. When you see one, you know there's a lot of them around. Okay? A lot of mistakes with a lot of radiocarbon dating. Our work, he added, should prompt a round of revisions and rethinking for the timeline of the archaeology and early history of the southern Levant through the early biblical period, because they're always going by this biblical history to do comparisons. And I'm sorry, the Bible is not a history book, and neither is it a story about, Jesus and his 12 merry men, okay? It's a book of spirit, okay? It's not a history book. His co-authors on the PNAS paper are Cornell Tree, let's see who's involved with this. Cornell Tree Ring Laboratory Senior Researcher Carol Gregg, 77, PhD, 06. Postdoctoral researcher Britta Lorenzen, 06, PhD, 15. Christopher Bronk Ramsey and David Cheval of the Oxford University School of Archaeology, and A.J. Timothy Joel and Todd E. Lang of the University of Arizona's Accelerator Mass Spectrometry Laboratory. Okay, folks, so you got it from the horse's mouth here, all right? Radiocarbon dating obviously is more complicated than they think, okay? And this only reveals one complication that they discovered and what becomes of it. And that, this is serious in their, estimate, because people who are doing research on these things are going to write history, and they're going to write it all wrong. So you can imagine all the stuff that's based on this radiocarbon 14, it could be just totally bogus, because the methods for doing the dating is not fully refined. And this article is evidence that it's not fully refined. Is this the only area that it needs refinement in? If it's so, I'll just eat one potato chip. Yeah, what, you got a whole bag of potato chips there? I'll just eat one. Yeah, there's just one flaw in it. We found this one, but maybe they're being honest in this, or whatever they found in there. But this bodes pretty badly for anybody who's used carbon dating for doing their stuff. Now everybody's got to go back and recheck their work based on this research, even if they can. I don't know how many years it's going to take for them to correlate that, or they think they can just correlate it right away, 1, 2, 3. I doubt it. Sounds like there's too many ands, ifs, or buts, and maybes in there. Okay, guys. Well, I just, I didn't really expect to do a video tonight, or this morning, whenever it is, and I just got sick of hearing. I mean, as I said, every book I read and video I watch, even on other people's channels and stuff, they're reading articles referring to carbon 14 dating or carbon dating. When I read it on my channel, you'll hear me say often, I don't do it all the time, but many people who are, been subs for a while know that when I come across that in a lot of the research material, I say this is nonsense. Okay, it's not sufficient, and I've told you before that I've read many times, whereas the academics themselves are not happy with it. It's not accurate enough in their opinion for a variety of reasons. This is their own internal, policing that they're doing here. But outside researchers, people who are in an alternative field have, their own criticisms, and people like LAH Russia, who are mainstream academics, but from Russia, but they deal in alternative history there. That's what their specialty is. They've roundly criticized carbon dating and tree ring dating. They give very scientific explanations for their criticism. All right, guys. So I thought you might be interested in that, and have to tell some of these people to keep their trap shut about the stuff when they talk about carbon 14 dating and carbon dating, especially when it applies to these areas that they're suggesting, because that's what they're saying: Israel, southern Jordan, and Egypt, and I would imagine the whole surrounding area. So, whatever, that's all they're willing to admit, I guess, without causing a huge stir. I'm almost guaranteed that, this is a reserved sort of admonition. They probably want to do more, but I bet you they're going to cause a lot of controversy just because of that. So, and it was 2018. It's been a couple of years, but even so, it's brand new. Alrighty, folks, did you like that? I hope you did. Please hit the like button if you did like that. And we'll talk about maybe tree ring dating in another video, because I'd like to go over some of the criticisms of that as well. Alright? Alright, guys, be back with you real soon. We're going to keep on covering the Giants. I'm going to do West Virginia next, because I skipped over that. So we'll get back to that, because that's a real interesting state. For the Giants. No, not the Giants. Shut up. Alright, guys. Buckcat 7 signing out. Peace.